My name is Julie Russ, and my research question is, how has the mass incarceration of African American men in the United States impacted the development of their children in the past 20 years? According to the National Resource Center on Children and Families of the Incarcerated, 1 in 57 white children, compared to 1 in 9 African American children in the United States, have an incarcerated parent. 2.7 million minor children have at least one incarcerated parent. As shown by this chart from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, it is clear that African American men are disproportionately affected by mass incarceration. Since Ronald Reagan's War on Drugs campaign, incarceration rates among minority groups have skyrocketed. Bill Clinton's hard stance on prison reform during his presidential term has also contributed to the problem. According to researchers at the Justice Policy Institute, there were 1.4 million prison and jail inmates in the United States in 1994. This has been detrimental to the children of incarcerated men in multiple aspects of their lives. For example, children of incarcerated minorities are disadvantaged academically. According to the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, 1 in 10 families reported that young people in the family were unable to complete high school or go to college as the result of incarceration of a family member. Sarah Sparks, an education researcher at Education Week, stated that only 13 to 25% of students with imprisoned fathers graduate from college. According to researchers at the Economic Policy Institute, children with incarcerated parents are 48% more likely to have ADHD and 23% more likely to suffer from developmental delays than children with non-incarcerated parents. Sons of incarcerated parents are 43% more likely to exhibit behavioral problems. Children are also hurt in their home lives due to the financial hardship of incarceration on families. Statistics from the Ella Baker Center's report also stated that 65% of families in a study they conducted had difficulty meeting basic needs as a result of a loved one's incarceration. African American children were found to be 65% more likely to become homeless as the result of familial incarceration than white children. In order to address the developmental problems faced by African American children with incarcerated fathers, a variety of solutions could be implemented. These solutions could include instituting parental advice services in prisons, providing financial aid to the families of those incarcerated, or starting youth counseling programs in schools to prove that struggle facilitates growth. One of these solutions would establish parental training and advice services in correctional institutions. By doing so, incarcerated fathers would be better suited to parent following their release. Most incarcerated men did not grow up with healthy home lives, as exposure to drug use, abuse, and other risk factors was common. Therefore, they often aren't able to replicate this for their own children. Parental training programs would help them reconnect with their families more smoothly after they are released from prison, preventing spousal conflict and the negative impacts that would have on adolescents. However, sometimes reintegrating fathers back into the home is harmful for their children. Many incarcerated fathers have been removed from their children's lives for an extended time, so the parenting program wouldn't be helpful. According to Ross Park, former director of the Center for Family Studies, fathers serve 80 months in state prison and 103 months in federal prison on average. The parental advice services disregard the needs of children with fathers that are serving life sentences or sentences exceeding the developmental years. Although the prospect of parental training programs is attractive, it would be difficult to effectively implement. Another way to improve the developmental well-being of those children would be to provide financial aid to mothers, alleviating stress and allowing them time to adjust to their new circumstances, without the legal debts dragging her and her children down. As shown in this graph from the UC Davis Center for Poverty Research, children with incarcerated parents are significantly more likely to be categorized as officially poor and have difficulty paying bills or accessing medical care. Basic needs often go unmet as a result of financial strain that results from familial incarceration. By providing financial aid to these families, children will be able to live without financial stress. However, it is unlikely that the federal government would be willing to create this type of program, as funding would be difficult to find. The system would also be extremely vulnerable to abuse, and with so many people currently incarcerated in the United States, regulation of the system could easily weaken and become disorganized. Overall, this plan is not very feasible. Although entire families would benefit from financial aid, children specifically could be assisted in dealing with the circumstances of incarceration through counseling programs in schools. This solution directly impacts children and would allow them to handle their emotions in a healthy way. By establishing counseling programs, these children would be informed about their incarcerated parents' situation in an environment that's free of stigma and shame, and encourages children to express their emotions. This would also help in combating the psychological obstacles many children in this position often face, such as behavioral issues and academic struggles. Opponents of this solution may argue that children with incarcerated parents may refuse to participate in such programs out of embarrassment or pride, negating their usefulness. However, this limitation isn't realistic, as these counseling programs would be conducted privately. Children who are identified to have a parent in prison should be given special attention by counselors and should be required to attend counseling sessions at school, much like the Rainbows for All Children program. By encouraging kids to engage with others who have had similar experiences, Rainbows helps children remember that they are not alone in their circumstances and helps them to reach out to their peers for support. Mass incarceration of African American men in America is at an all-time high, but their children and families are damaged just as much as them in the process. The declining developmental circumstances of African American youth with incarcerated fathers could best be addressed by establishing counseling programs in schools. These programs would effectively combat the many problems they face, both with mental health and academics. They would combat the behavioral and emotional issues that stem from incarceration and result in incarceration in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, first question is, what information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
So, something that was really important to understand before I started researching was the background of mass incarceration itself. So I had to do a lot of research on minorities' mass incarceration and when it started, how it began, and how it's climbed over the years. And so I focused a lot about that in my research. And so it's a big part of the problem. And it really started with the war on drugs.
Okay, second question. What advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
Right now, there isn't a lot of research in this field longitudinally, so there's a lot of short-term research about children in maybe within a 10-year time span, but not a lot over the course of their lives. And that's because mass incarceration has only been around since the 80s, and we've only started doing research about it recently. So I would suggest that researchers attempt to design an experiment to determine the mental health effects and the circumstances that end up putting children in different positions over the course of their lives and see how mass incarceration affects them in that sense. Oh yeah, and then here's my citations.